Do you remember what I whispered to you under this very tree?
Do you know why a sink floats and a ship gets stoned?
So let's talk about the season finale of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, and the big reveal that this dude is actually Sauron, to the surprise of no one, except Galadriel, of course. The episode is called Alloyed, and I think it's a fairly paint-by-numbers conclusion. Now, there's something truly lacking about the quality of writing if the big reveal of the season was fairly obvious to the audience for some episodes now, but it was something the main character, Galadriel, was completely oblivious to and very surprised by. It's very frustrating for audiences to be so far ahead of the protagonist and just waiting for them to catch up with us, because it also makes the character seem a bit stupid. Good writing would have also kept the audience in the dark as to Halbrand's true identity, and thus created a massive shock factor when it was revealed that he is in fact Sauron. Now, I don't claim to be an expert on Tolkien by any measure of means, but unless I'm very much mistaken, I believe the idea that Sauron can indeed take disguises was outlined in the Silmarillion, but Halbrand as a character is non-canon, which is to say he was created for the series, The Rings of Power. Now, I want to make reference to something that Morgoth's review posted on Telegram about a Forbes article, which reads, The Rings of Power Season 2, Sauron will be like Walter White, Tony Soprano, and the Joker. To which Morgoth commented, the writers simply cannot imagine fictional forms which weren't part of post-2000s culture. I mean, why not make Sauron like Sauron? Or, if that's too difficult, read Paradise Lost and model him on Satan. But nah, metaphysical evil can't exist. Only neurotic, angsty anti-heroes can. It's pathetic. This is a very good point, and I think it speaks not only to the creative bankruptcy of Hollywood, but also, I think, to the depiction of evil in modern pop culture. It actually comes back to that first scene in the first episode of The Rings of Power, where Galadriel's brother is droning on about that utterly wince-inducing and ridiculous metaphor about why the ship floats and the stone doesn't. And there's a line in there where young Galadriel says, but sometimes the lights shine just as brightly reflected in the water as they do in the sky. It's hard to say which way is up and which way is down. And she asks him, how am I to know which lights to follow? Which is her basically asking him, how can I tell good from evil? To which he replies, sometimes we cannot know until we have touched the darkness. Which, in my opinion, is an absolutely abhorrent notion, especially considering this is being told to a child. He basically said that sometimes you can't tell what evil is until you've experienced it for yourself. This is madness. But I think this kind of insane philosophy has only been made possible because of the age we're living in, an age where people are being led to believe that there are no absolutes. So there cannot be any moral absolutes. Everything is relative and everything exists on a spectrum, don't you know? This completely abandons all classical and traditional wisdom when it comes to morality. We are supposed to teach children about universal truths and things called principles. Our principles and values and the things we know to be irrefutably true are things that are supposed to guide us. I think when we abandon these things, we lose sight of who we are and we fail to function on a spiritual level as human beings. The Christian understanding of the nature of evil is that it exists as a literal thing. Absolute evil is real, and that's what Sauron, like Satan, is supposed to embody. Conversely, we had characters who were absolute good and absolute pure, and their behaviors, sacrifices, and principles served as inspiration to the next generation. Maybe I sound like a bit of an old fuddy-duddy here, but nowadays, I just don't think young people have very many strong and inspirational role models. Instead, they have anti-heroes and lovable rogue villains that exist in this kind of moral grey area of uncertainty and ambiguity. Personally, I preferred the original Lord of the Rings depiction of Sauron as a mostly incorporeal form, although he would on occasion be shown in his Dark Lord form. But the tendency to anthropomorphize such concepts of evil can ultimately weaken them and rob them of their genuine terror, and I think that's what happened with the Halbrand version of Sauron in The Rings of Power. Anyway, as for the other storylines in this episode, the episode also sees the death of Sadok Burrows, the Harfoot character, and the stranger is revealed to be a wizard like Gandalf. Nori Brandyfoot goes off with him on an adventure to try to find out more about him. Sauron goes off to Mordor at the end, and the three rings are forged by the elves. So there is quite a bit of resolution in the finale, and I think also enough stories left unresolved for the second season. But this series has been very poor overall, and in fact, I can't remember the last time a show has provided so much material for memes and satire. As you've no doubt noticed on YouTube and elsewhere, the memes are probably the best thing that's come out of this show. $1 billion budget, and the best they could produce is a dull, predictable, empty shadow of Tolkien's work. I'll say this in conclusion. Ultimately, we already know how the story of Middle-earth is resolved in Tolkien's Third Age in The Lord of the Rings. There was no reason for the Second Age to be turned into a live-action prequel series. There was no serious interest in something like that from Tolkien fans. We've seen Sauron defeated already, and it's been put to film in the Peter Jackson trilogy. And we especially didn't need to see the departures from established canon that we've seen in this series, to say nothing of the low-quality writing. At best, this series has detracted from the saga and added absolutely nothing of value to the legacy of Tolkien. And finally, it has proven once again that modern Hollywood is bereft of original ideas and unable to innovate and come up with entirely new characters, new series, and new stories. And just think, there's plans for 5 seasons of this show. Oh boy.